This was frustrating to you? Well, I think that means it worked. I think that was probably the goal, to make this fucking frustrating. Activist of the week, which is the best. I'll give you a hint. It's not a human. And it's not an orca. Although the orcas are doing great work. They got activist of the week last week, but okay, so this is at the, I think it was the practice for the Congressional softball game. So you've heard of the Congressional baseball game. I guess there's also, and I think it's all women in this one, maybe. But this is the Congressional softball game, and in Washington, D.C. And Climate Defiance decided that perhaps the fact that we're in an existential threat and the world's collapsing around us and the air quality outside is unbreathable, and all of Canada's on fire, and certain countries and islands going underwater, and the ocean is hotter than it's ever been, and we just saw these 7 hottest days in the history of the earth, at least the human history of the earth, the past 100,000 years. We just saw 7 hottest days in a row, all of them setting records. Perhaps that's more important than your fucking softball game. That's what Climate Defiance thought. And so they did this. And for those of you listening on the podcast, I'll try to describe a little bit. So what you're hearing right now is them throwing on Climate Defiance t-shirts and running out on the field.
Looks like we're going to have a little stoppage in play to deal with the protests in the outfield. End fossil fuels are what I'm seeing on the shirts.
Congress, end fossil fuels! End fossil fuels! Congress, end fossil fuels!
And so they've gone out on the field, and they're in the middle of the field with locked arms, chanting "End fossil fuels," and the game is on hold while they draw everyone's attention to, I don't know, something, I'd say slightly more important.
End fossil fuels, Congress, end fossil fuels!
It's interesting that the women's game for charity is being interrupted in a very prolonged way.
I love these fucking liberals, man. Oh God. The people, did you hear that? That was a commentator that just said that. I guess this is the commentators for, I don't know where it was being broadcast, but the commentator goes, it's kind of interesting or upsetting that it's the women's game. Why does that matter? Why does that fucking matter? These are these are Congress members having their lives slightly disrupted while they go ahead and continue to vote to destroy the future of humanity. That is what they're doing on their work days. And now their life is slightly disrupted. And these the clearly liberal announcers say, isn't it interesting? It's the women's game. It doesn't fucking matter which game it is. I'm sure if Climate Defiance is able to, they'll also interrupt the men's game. But gender doesn't fucking matter when you're burning the world alive. Like, they interrupted the women's game for charity. None of that matters. None of that matters at all. You idiots.
But the men's was not. What do you think that means?
Oh yeah, it can. And further, that is a phenomenally dumb comment by these goddamn announcers. What do you think that is? The men's game wasn't interrupted. First of all, if you look at the people who interrupted this game, it's about 70% women. Okay. So do you really think it's because the women who are this is a majority women group that's interrupting this game? Do you think they sat around and they thought, we dislike women, our own gender, and we hate them so much that we only want to interrupt the women's game? Or do you think it probably had something to do with either the time that they couldn't get their own schedules to align, or perhaps maybe the level of security at the men's game? I'm sure there are plenty of reasons for why this was the game that got interrupted. That's the dumbest. Yeah, that's right. This 70 or 80% female group interrupting the game only wanted to interrupt the women's game because they hate women. Yep, that's it.
Eric?
Having covered Congress for some time now, these delays sometimes on.
And I love how, I don't know which congressperson this is, or whether it's possible it's not a congressperson if, staff are allowed to also play. I don't actually know how it works. But she's in her uniform yelling at the protesters, "You have to leave. You have to leave now. We have a softball game while we continue to vote for fossil fuels to destroy our future."
Totally unrelated policy issues can often be very frustrating. We do see that from time to time.
It's very frustrating, huh? This was frustrating to you? Well, I think that means it worked. I think that was probably the goal, to make this fucking frustrating in your ivory towers. And there's also the fact, they're like, well, why would this be interrupted? Well, guess what, folks? There's not a lot of things that Congress people do where it's just open to the public and you actually can interrupt them. If you try to get into the Capitol building, which is supposed to be the people's building, if you try to get in there with a group of people and hold up banners and things like that, generally they stop you. Generally they tackle you. Actually, I was with Kevin and Margaret, Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers, two amazing activists. They do amazing work. And I mean, Kevin has passed on, which is still sad to me, but they have done amazing work throughout their lives. And but I watched them. I went with them to the FCC. This is when net neutrality still existed. It has now been murdered. And they were pivotal in actually keeping net neutrality for an extra 2 years. I honestly don't think it would have happened without the activism of Kevin and Margaret. But so they stood up at this FCC hearing, and basically empty, the FCC hearing. It's got 15 people in the gallery, in the audience, and they stood up and held up a banner that said "Keep net neutrality" or something like that. And before they could even get the banner unfurled, they had it unfurled for about a second. A giant, overweight security guard who was waiting for them to try anything, full on, like NFL styled, tackled Kevin, just charged straight at him and into him. And that's what happens to you when you try and hold up a sign inside these buildings. So in order to interrupt the proceedings of your Congress people, you often have to be at events like this one. So that, another announcer's like, "Oh, it's very frustrating that people with unrelated policy issues." Well, yeah, what policy issue connected to softball were you expecting? Expected to end the use of aluminum bats in softball now. Is that what you expected? It doesn't. All their complaints are bullshit. It's a women's game. Who cares? It's for charity. Doesn't matter. It's for it's unrelated to softball. Doesn't fucking matter.
Fuels are killing me. Fossil fuels are killing me. No LNG. Fossil fuels are killing me. No LNG. Fossil fuels are killing me.
So there you go. The latest action by Climate Defiance. They're at climatedefiance.org. I interviewed one of the co-founders just last week. I think it was last week. And that can be found at rumble.com/leecamp. But yeah, so check out their stuff. You can volunteer with them. You can help out. You can do whatever. But love seeing them interrupt our Congress people who do not have their lives interrupted enough.